Hey guys, welcome back to the Summer of Ecclesiastes. We just covered how to understand the book. We spent about 3 lessons going through some of the dangers, some of the things that you're going to run into as you study the book of Ecclesiastes. Now let's get into a little bit about the book itself. Now, the book of Ecclesiastes is written by Solomon. All right, we don't get his name from the text. In fact, the author himself is called the preacher. That comes from a Hebrew word, koheleth, and just at the get-go, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't speak Hebrew, all right? I know what these words mean. I don't know how to properly pronounce them. If you do, great. I'm sorry. English all the way. So, sorry, a little Latin. Anyway, so as you deal with this koheleth, it means the one who assembles or the one who gathers. It's referring to the person who is standing at the head of an assembly and he's speaking to a gathered group of people. So again, imagine Solomon as a preacher, and he's gathered together a group and he's saying, let me tell you what I have learned as I have lived my life. You'll see that throughout Ecclesiastes. There's so much that he has to say to young men, to old. I mean, he just goes through all these different things, talking to us about life experience. And it seems like he's kind of presenting a dissertation or presenting his case. And so there are people who actually take it like, oh, there's the author of the first chapter, and then there's the body, and then there's the author at the end. And okay, I just kind of take it as he is introducing what he has to say, and then he goes on and he talks, and then he wraps up his discussion at the very end. And so you'll see this throughout. Again, starts off with the preacher, and then Ecclesiastes chapter 12, which is toward the end, it'll kind of come back in with him almost in third person talking again. Now, who is the Koheleth? I've already spoiled it for you because that's how I roll. But there's a lot of arguments over who the Koheleth is, and again, I take that it is Solomon. I'll show you why I take that case. Now, here's some of the arguments. First of all, why we would think it was Solomon. As you read the text, and we'll see this as we exegete the text in just a little bit, but as he goes through, he says he's the son of David. Okay, so you only have so many sons of David that actually made it through. Most of the sons of David die. We'll get into that. That's part of the thing Solomon's experiencing in his life. But he's a son of David. It also says he's king in Jerusalem, so that's going to narrow it down even further. We're not talking about, Adonijah. We're not talking about Absalom. We're talking about someone who was the son of David, who survived long enough to become king in Jerusalem. So, okay, that limits it quite a bit. He also has a huge level of wealth. As you read down through all the things that he does in his life, you're going, yeah, this dude had a lot of stuff. And so those are some of the reasons why, as we look at this content, we're going to say, I think this is talking about Solomon. So as we take a look at that, those are some of the characteristics that we look at and we say, that's Solomon. I mean, it has to be Solomon. Now, like I said, don't parody the other side. What does the other side say? Why would the other side say it's not Solomon? Well, yes, Solomon did all these things. This is the only man who we really know would fit all these descriptions, but here's some of the evidences against it. First of all, this is a minor one, especially since so many people had multiple names back then. He's never mentioned by name. Okay, so as we deal with Solomon, okay, I mean, I guess that's sort of. But also, 112 says that he was king over Jerusalem. So it's almost implying that at some point he abdicated, which Solomon never did. Now, as we get into who they think wrote the book, you'll see that this argument is bad either way. So I don't put much stock in this. I think he's just talking about like, hey, I was king over Jerusalem and I did this. He's not saying he isn't still. He's just saying, sure, I was. Again, maybe, Now, 116 also says that he was wiser than all they that ruled in Jerusalem before him, which I know is easy for us to lose track of because, again, we're looking at this way past. But again, there was only one king before him that ruled from Jerusalem because David established Jerusalem as the capital. So he's talking about one guy. Like I said, I don't put a whole lot of stock in this argument either, for reasons we'll get to when you see who they think wrote it. And again, there are supposed linguistic issues. There's words that are not commonly used in the Hebrew of that time. They come from other languages, things like that. And so they say, well, I mean, come on now. I mean, he's using words that didn't come into Hebrew for quite a while. That doesn't play. Now, again, I don't think any of these arguments are very good. I don't think they are convincing. But again, there are scholars who will then say Solomon didn't write Ecclesiastes, and these are some of the reasons. So, like I said, which side do we settle on? We really do. We settle on the idea that this is Solomon. Now, again, God inspired the Bible. He says what he means to say. I know you're looking at that going, okay, I mean, that's great, but he never said that it was Solomon. Okay, okay, but he kind of did. Occam's razor would tell us to take the plain meaning by what it says, and the plain meaning, very, very clearly, would be that this is Solomon. He fits all the descriptions, as we talked about. But again, if you have a man who's the son of David, who's got great wisdom, who rules in Jerusalem, who would you think that naturally was? Why is it so hard to say, well, he used the word was? Okay. He also said that mankind and animals go to the same place when they die. So if we're gonna quibble over one word, you're gonna have bigger issues if that's where you're gonna go with it. And so I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it is something that is worth giving up tradition over, because again, it's clearly, in my opinion, talking about Solomon. As far as the linguistic concerns, because that's actually an important one, I think most of the other arguments are pretty weak, but the linguistic concern, there's a scholar by the name of Gleason Archer. He discusses this one extensively, and he draws attention to the fact that some of these non-Jewish expressions could have actually come from the Phoenicians. And if you think about Solomon and all the trade he was doing and all the people he was interacting with, of all people in the country, who do you think would probably have the most foreign vocabulary? Probably Solomon. Now, we're going to get into it here in just a sec, but I believe it also plays into who the audience of the book is. And you'll notice that there's a lot of things in this book that are seemingly written to a more broad audience. And so it would actually fit really well to say, yes, Solomon is using some foreign words. He's using some expressions that would not come into Hebrew for quite some time. But again, most likely he would have gotten those from some of the areas around him, because again, he's trading with all of these countries. He's got wives from all of these countries. He's got proverbs coming in from all of these countries. I mean, you can look and you can see some Egyptian proverbs that have made their way into the Bible. Why wouldn't some of the linguistic characteristics come in as well? So those are some of my cases where I say I don't think it's reasonable to assume it was written by someone else. You can kind of see some of the trade routes that would have been going around at the time. And again, so he was very, very busy. Again, this is the different places that would colonize where. But again, he would have had trade routes to a lot of these places. And yeah, you can see the Phoenicians, they would have clearly been trading with where Solomon was. So again, just a lot going on there, and you got that. Now, that's what we believe with Solomon. Again, that's why we think Solomon is the author. The other take, and I don't buy this, is that this book was written during the intertestamental period, kind of Second Temple. And it was written as a guy pretending to be Solomon and going through Solomon's life. Again, I mean, maybe. So he's just basically making it all up and just trying to prove a point. Okay, so it's either a guy pretending to be Solomon and taking on all of Solomon's persona, or it's Solomon. Which one seems more reasonable to you? And so that's where I just take it as this is Solomon. Because if you don't think it's Solomon, then you think it is someone writing, pretending to be Solomon. And so all those arguments, and really the only argument that would help prove this case would be, it uses words that are non-Hebrew. Okay. So you're going to jettison all of tradition and all of the reason and all that because he uses some words that they wouldn't have had yet. Again, he would have gotten those from trade. Like that's where I come back to. And so again, just some things there. So it's either Solomon or a guy pretending to be Solomon. So I just go with the fact that it's Solomon. Now, not to beat a dead horse, here's just a little bit of statistics. Solomon's going to live from 990-ish to 930. He's going to rule from 970 to 930, so you can kind of get some idea from the dates. Phoenicia is going to exist all through that area. It's going to be a powerhouse, specifically right when Solomon is reigning. So any strange Phoenician words that are going to creep their way into the language are going to be able to do so. And again, it may not have crept in during the commoners' time, but again, Solomon of all people is probably going to know it And you might understand the word even if you don't use it yourself. So just some things to take into account here. Now, the purpose of the book, one of the weird things, speaking of the audience of Ecclesiastes, one of the things, I don't think Ecclesiastes is strictly written to a Jewish audience. Here's why. The name Jehovah, Yahweh, is not used in the book of Ecclesiastes. That's the covenant name between Israel and God. But his covenant name is not used. Instead, the Elohim is the one that is used. That's another name for God. It basically means one who lives in the spiritual realm. The word Elohim is used of all sorts of things, but it designates God in a lot of cases. And it refers to God as a supreme creator, a transcendent over creation, drives home this idea that he is sovereign, he is to be feared and worshipped. And I think this is on purpose because Solomon is drawing attention to there is a God worth serving, and you don't have to be part of the Jewish covenant to serve this God. So I think that's fun. Again, Jehovah Yahweh is the covenant name of God between him and Israel, and this seems to be a calculation on Solomon's part. So it seems like Solomon is trying to reach out to a more secular congregation. He's using some words that wouldn't be common vernacular to the Hebrews. Seems to be talking about more universal themes. There's not a whole lot of like Judaism stuff in the book. Not teaching you how to worship, not teaching you about Jewish law. It's just very practical, very basic, very complicated in a way of like, you have to sit down but the themes are very basic, like serve God while you're alive. There's no point to a lot of these things that we're doing in our lives. And hey, serve God while you're young, while you have the energy, because you're going to die. Those are all universal themes. There's nothing Jewish about it. There's nothing Gentile about it. It's very universal. And so the fact that he then even goes so far as to use a more universal name for God probably implies that the audience of Ecclesiastes is a more universal audience. Now, as we get a little deeper into the book, we're going to talk about the purpose and what all is going on. I'll give you guys a preview here. In this book, Solomon is seeking to express through apparent contradiction. You'll notice that that's the thing. We embrace this conflict. We embrace this contradiction. He's expressing through an apparent contradiction the fact that anything sought outside the provision of God will be as fleeting as vapor and as pleasurable as chasing the wind. We'll get into all of that, but that is a summary here of where we're going with Ecclesiastes. So we've got an author, Solomon, more experienced than any man in history up to that point and probably after. He's writing to a big, big audience of people, trying to convince them and say, look at these apparent contradictions. Look at this inconsistency. Look at this stuff that I don't understand. Okay, serve God. Otherwise, you're chasing after the wind. And I think that's a really powerful conclusion that we can end on and start next time on. Guys, if this content is good, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe. There's a comment section below. We're going to start getting to some side notes pretty soon. Got a few of those planned out already. And so again, if this is helpful for you, keep track of it. Put a little comment down there, and I'll try to make a side note to kind of explain in more detail some of those things. And thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time here on the Summer of Ecclesiastes.